Okay. Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming to my session today. There are so many amazing sessions out there that I'm really proud that you've come to this one. First of all, the obligatory thank you to the sponsors, but genuinely, we've all just had a fantastic lunch. I assume we all had a fantastic lunch. Mine was. We wouldn't have had that without the sponsors. We wouldn't be here today without the sponsors. So just honestly, thank you to the sponsors, and do go and visit their booths to show them your gratitude. Hopefully, you have come to hear me talk about unlock communication with Lightning message channels. If you haven't, now's your chance to quickly sneak out the room. But if that's what you're here for, excellent, stay along. Quick introduction for those that don't know me, probably most of you. My name is Ellie Mathewman. I'm the lead engineer at a fintech in London called LendInvest. I've been working in the ecosystem about 14 years. I currently co-lead the London Developer User Group. I'm going to spend about 30 seconds just talking about user groups because I only actually started attending them about 2.5 years ago. And that's one of my biggest regrets in my Salesforce career, is not starting attending them sooner. So if you don't currently attend your local user group, and most places have got local user groups, seek them out and start attending them because you will not regret it. You will not look back. There you go, little plug for user groups. But let's get on to unlocking communication with Lightning message channels. So the first question you might be asking you is, let's talk about the agenda, sorry. So first we are going to talk about what is a Lightning message channel. Then I'm going to try and, at a very high level, explain to you why I think you should use Lightning message channels. But then we'll get into some actual use cases. The use cases I'll be showing today are simplified versions, but they are versions of use cases that I have actually used them in myself. They're just a little bit simplified. And then I'll get onto some of the technical bit, how you actually implement them in the code. Then there are some caveats around using them, some things you should know before you start using them. And then hopefully there should be 5 or 10 minutes at the end for some Q&A if anyone does have any questions. So let's get started with what is a Lightning message channel. The first thing I'm going to say is when it came available. So it came available in summer 20, which is 5 years ago now, and it's not really evolved since, but it's not needed to evolve since. What that means is it's got nothing to do with generative AI, Agentforce, data cloud, any of that. This is all pre-existing before that. If you don't know what Lightning message channels are, but you do know what a platform event is, there's some similarity between the two of them. So they both use like a pub-sub model to send messages. One of the key differences being is that platform events are platform-wide. They affect the database, they affect the server, whereas Lightning message channels are very much only client-side. So they affect the browser, the current DOM that is being used by the user. Lightning message channels utilize the Lightning message service, which is the framework that Salesforce have in place to facilitate the messages. So if you hear Lightning message service, it goes hand in hand with Lightning message channels. The way I kind of like to simplify the description of this is Lightning message service is like the infrastructure of a train network, for example, which the tracks and the stations, etc. Lightning message channels are then the trains that can then use that network, and then the messages you're sending on the channel are like the passengers on the train. So that's kind of a very simplified version of what it is. It is obviously DOM side, client side message feature. So as I keep saying, it does not affect the database or the server. It is all client side, but it does allow communication between all of those client side, excuse me, things. So you can use it to communicate between Visualforce and Lightning components, both Aura and Lightning Web components, which is really useful to know because hopefully if you're building new things, they're built in Lightning Web components, but I'm sure there's legacy stuff you've got using Visualforce that you may think it would be really good to be able to add a Lightning message channel. So just to let you know, I will be focusing on implementing them in Lightning Web components in this talk, but there will be a link to lots of documentation at the end, which includes how you can implement it in Visualforce and Aura if that's what your preference is. But you should get enough of a gist from today's session to understand that. So that's a little bit about what they are. Let's move along to why I think you should use them. There's 3 statements here, but they all kind of boil down to the same thing. So basically, they help to decouple your components. By using Lightning message channels, you can have your 2 components live completely separately on your page. and you don't have to then pass data up and down from nested components. You can send them directly to each other. And that just means that your components become much more modular. You can potentially reuse them more because they're not connected to any kind of container or anything like that. So it just helps to simplify the overall architecture by using them. Let's move on to the first use case where I think it will really start to make more sense. And that's on Lightning record pages. I had a water somewhere. What did I do with it? So this is a use case based on an example I used when they literally first came out and I started utilizing them. On the next page, there's going to be a video, partly because I'm scared of doing a live demo, but it's going to be split into two, and the top half and the bottom half will have almost identical functionality, but the top half is showing it being used with just using a nested container, and the bottom half is showing it using Lightning Message. So it's just to give you an example of what it looks like before I dive into what it means. Hopefully this will work. So as you can see, you've got a search functionality. We're searching people, we've got search results, and then we're selecting one of those search results and we've got a quick edit. It's a simplified version, so this isn't potentially an actual use case for search because you might not build that, but it gives you an idea of it. And so what is happening is these, in the top half, that is all one nested components with 3 child components on it. So when you click the search in the search people part, it's sending the search results up to your parent container and passing it back down to your search results so it can display the search results. And then when you select one of the results, it's passing it back up to the container again and then back down to your edit page so that the edit page knows which one you selected. Whereas on the bottom one, they're 3 very separate components. They're not actually nested within any other container. So the search results are being sent using a message channel just to the event bus. Then the middle component is subscribed to that event bus. And when that message is sent, this receives it and is able to populate based on that. And then again, when you select it, it sends another thing up to the event bus so that it can be displayed in the final component. And why I think the bottom one is a potentially better solution is because you might demonstrate it to the stakeholder that wants this piece of functionality. And they say, can we just change the layout a little? Can we just have it, instead of going 3 across, we have it 1 at the top and then the 2 at the bottom. And if you built it using your nested container, your nested components, this is what happens. You go to your edit page and you go, okay, can I change it? And then that's when you realize, no, because it's all one nested container. So if we want to change that layout, we then have to go all the way back to our VS Code or whichever ID you're using, change all your HTML, CSS. It's a lot of hassle. And then a week later that you show it in the new format and the stakeholder goes, oh, do you know what? I actually preferred it in the 3 afterwards. And you have to do it all again. Whereas using the message channels, there are now 3 separate components. So when you go to your edit page, you can actually see, here we go, there's actually 3 separate components, which means, oh, okay, I want to change it. I can simply change the template. So instead of being 3 regions, I'm changing it to a header and 2 regions. Click next to make sure you're assigning everything to your right region. And then save it. And then you can see on the next page the functionality all works exactly the same, but it's now laid out the way that they want to see it. So they can now look at it and go, oh, do you know what? I don't like it. You can change it back. And bosh, you've changed it back. That's kind of one of the advantages that I see of using Lightning message channels, because it makes those components modular and you can then move them around as you want without having to go back to your VS Code or your developer every time. Really nailing the point here, so apologies for repeating myself, but just to repeat, using the nested components, we've got our container component and then the 3 components in the middle. And so we've got data going up and down between the container and the children. And this is obviously a simplified version. So in this one, it's actually not too bad. But can you imagine, I'm sure you've seen much more complex nested containers and you wanted a component here to pass data to a component there. You'd really have them to be traversing up and down. Whereas using message channels, you can just publish it from that one, subscribe it from that, and you're then missing all the complexity of pushing it up and down or what have you. such as the example in the Lightning Message one, where it is just going up to the event bus, and whichever component wants to pick it up can pick it up. So in this one, you could use the search results with different components. It then becomes its own component as well. It's not tightly coupled to the search one. There's obviously still some loosely coupled there because it relies on some kind of data being sent to it. Otherwise, it can't show anything. But it's no longer tightly coupled to that search form. You could use it with a second version of a search form or what have you. And again, just to show you from a code point of view, here we've got the container where we've got the 3 components with the data going up and down. Whereas with the message channels, we've got the publisher on one of them and the subscriber on the other. I'll go into the code in a lot more detail in a little bit, but just kind of wanted to show you the difference in method at this point. The other example is in experience sites. If anyone develops for the experience site, you'll probably be used to the fact that you think you can do all these amazing things and then you realize certain components don't work in experience sites and suddenly you're having to find some stupid workarounds. But I'm delighted to tell you that Lightning message channels work perfectly well in experience site as they do regular ones. So the next example is where you're loading a page and you've got a header and a page, and they're 2 separate components, and it's just the page is sending the data to the header, so the header knows where it is. Let me quickly show you the video while I take a drink. So here we've got our home page. You can see we've got separate components, a home page and a site header component. Similarly to, I can't remember which one I go to, cases, the cases page. Again, you can see it's separate components, a case page and a site header. So they are separate components. I'm just going to preview it here rather than going to the actual site. And you can see as I click through to opportunities, the data is sent from the opportunities component to the site header. So it knows it's at the opportunities page and it gives you your breadcrumbs for that, and similarly on cases. So that keeps those 2 components decoupled while still making sure it's got the data it needs. So hopefully that's kind of convinced you at least want to have a look at Lightning message channels. So now I'm going to get onto the technical bit. And the first thing is the thing that still blows my mind to be the case. And that is, if you wanted to set up a Lightning message channel or create one, where would you expect to go first? I don't know about you, but I'd expect to log into my org, click setup and search for it in your search setup. You can't find them on your org anywhere. You cannot even view them. Unlike Lightning Web Components, where you can at least see the name of them on there and know that they exist, you can't see them within your org at all. The only way they're creatable, updatable, deletable is via the metadata API. And that means that the way I normally create them is via my IDE. VS Code is my IDE of choice. Most people, I think, do use it. Obviously, other IDEs are available, and other ways of updating it via the metadata API is available. But I'm going to show you using VS Code. And what you'll see, again, it's another video because I'm scared of doing a live demo, is how manual the process is. If anyone went to Todd's session just before lunch, he showed you how you can build VS Code extensions. So if anyone wants to build a VS Code extension so that it's not so manual, please do. I keep telling myself I want to, and I don't have time. So it'd make it so much easier. But this is the manual way of doing it. First of all, you need to make sure the screen loads properly. Here we go. So first of all, whichever folder you want to create it in. So I'm just creating it in my default one for now. If you don't already have a folder, if you already have a folder for it, you'll be able to see it. But I'm just going to create it in my default. I can see I've only got a classes folder in that moment. So I'm creating a new folder, and it has to be called exactly message channels with a capital C and pluralized, because that's how the Salesforce metadata API will be able to read it and know what to do with it. So that's your folder created. Once your folder's created, you then need to manually create the file within the folder. So now we're creating the file. This first part is the name of your message channel, and this is really important. You can call it whatever you want. You can include underscores, dashes. I choose to stick with the camel case example with a capital M message, but then this last bit has to be .messagechannel-meta.xml, exactly like that. Again, that's how the API will read it properly. Just to remind you, that first half is the name of the channel, and we'll refer to that again later. So call the first half whatever you want, but you will need it later. Once you've got that file, I'm quickly going to paste some XML in there. I will go into more detail on that XML on the next slide, so don't worry that it's all done very quickly. But then I will quickly just deploy it to my org to show you how easy it is to then deploy it to the org, just using the normal VS Code. And there you go, you see it's created the message channel and it's all run successfully. So let's look at that XML then, because there's a lot of stuff in there. And I'll go through it line by line. Hopefully. Here we go. So first we start off with your standard XML, just explaining that it's an XML file and what the encoding is. And the next one we've got is the lightning message label. So that kind of tells it what it is and where to reference it. And then the next line is we actually get into the interesting stuff. So the next one is the master label. And this is just a master label. Just like for fields, you've got a label and an API name. The file name you gave earlier is the API name you'll use to reference this. This is literally just a label to read. If it was shown in Salesforce setup, it would probably be shown by that label, but it's not shown in setup for whatever reason. But do make sure you give it a good title, as with all your normal coding standards, you want to make sure you're naming things properly. The next one I've got is exposed true. So what this exposed property does, as it says, whether it can cross across namespaces. So if you're working with packages where you might be crossing namespaces, and this is for something like that, you're most definitely going to want it exposed true. If you are just working with your own org and there's no chance of wanting to cross namespaces, you can probably stick with false. If you deliberately want to make sure it can't cross namespaces, you definitely want to use exposed false. So that's just about that whole boundary. The next one, I think, is the description. Yeah. So again, this description, similar to the label, it doesn't do anything, but I think they're actually even more important that we have the description here than for lots of other things. And that's because people might want to reuse this channel later on. And if they use it wrongly, it could really mess things up and make things work weirdly. So this is the place to document what this channel is for and why it should be used, to make sure people know, okay, can I reuse this channel or do I need to create a new one? And then you could just leave it at that. If it was just based on an event had happened, something had been clicked, something had happened, you could just close this off, fire events, and then the subscriber would know that the event had happened. But you can also send data with your Lightning message channel. So to do that, we just need to add some fields. So we open it up with a Lightning message fields. We give it a field name that we can reference in the channel. We give it a description, and then we close it. And that's it for creating a field to send data via the message channel. As you can see in there, we don't actually specify a data type at all. So even though we've called it record ID, we could send anything. We could send a number, we could send a date. It doesn't verify it. We can send anything. So again, this is where I think it's really important that you actually put in the description what you're expecting to send on it, because again, if someone wants to use it, they need to know how to send it. It's like your documentation for how to use it. You could write separate documentation, but this is trying to save you the job by documenting it here. And you can add more than one field to send along with it. So in this example, I've got another field, and that's the record data. And so the top one is sending the ID of the record. The second one, it's sending a JSON of the record data. And then we're closing it. And that is it. That's your channel created. I say that's it. There's a lot of manual stuff, and you could easily get typos in there, which, trust me, I've done and wondered why the heck it wasn't working. So yes, it's very manual, and if anyone can make it better, that would be amazing. But at the moment, it's just a channel. It's just a train. It's not got any passengers. It hasn't got any messages to send it. So the next step is how we publish a message. Let me just test run. So if you want to send a message within a component, the first thing you need to do is make sure you're doing some additional imports into your LWC. So there's 2 new imports you'll need to do. The first one is to actually import methods from the Lightning message service that we spoke about at the beginning. So they are, in this example, because we're publishing, we want to import the publish method, obviously. We're also going to import something through the message called the message context. I'll just talk about that in a minute, so I will come back to that. But then the other thing you want to import is that message channel that you've just created, so it knows which channel, because you will probably have multiple channels, so you want to make sure you're importing the right channel. The example part here is just the alias that we're going to use in the JavaScript, but you can see when we're importing it from Salesforce, message channel, and then it's that file name that we're using there. So I said earlier, that file name you reference later, this is where you reference it, but importantly, you always then end it in your WWC to make sure that the system knows it is a custom message channel. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any standard message channels that have actually been exposed for us to use. There may be some ones that are standard that haven't been exposed. And so that __C is there just to make sure that it doesn't conflict with any standard message channels that Salesforce may be using. It guarantees it knows it's a custom one. Once you've imported them, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to wire in that message context. I don't want to talk too much about this, but just to make you understand what it is. This is the message service that is just wrapping the message you're going to send to give it extra context. It does what it says on the tin. And so that makes sure that in the browser kind of has more understanding of what it is and how to handle it. So we just need to make sure that we always include this message context so it gets wrapped around it. Once we've wired that in, we can actually look to publish it. So in this example, we're doing it on handle click, we're grabbing the message we want to send, and then we're literally just calling the publish method. Then we're sending 3 parameters in this instance. The first parameter is the message context that we wired in earlier on. The second one is the name of the channel that we want to send in, so that's the alias that we imported earlier on. And then the final one is the date that we're sending, so in this one, it's the message. And for publishing, it's actually really quite simple. You just literally publish and send those 3 bits with it. So that's the easy part. Subscribing and unsubscribing. I need to not stand too near the mic because otherwise I get echoes. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. Again, we have to start with some imports because I'm showing how to subscribe and unsubscribe in this one. Again, I'm importing both the subscribe and the unsubscribe method. The bottom one, again, we're importing the message context so that when it receives it, it knows the wrapping that's been put around it. And then that third one, application scope. You don't have to include it. In one of the next slides, I will go into more detail about application scope. So we're not going to worry about it too much now. It just defines the scope. And then again, we're importing the message channel that we want to use. Moving on to the body of it, again, we're wiring in the message context. I won't go into that again. And most of the time, you're probably going to want to subscribe to the channel in your connected callback. And that means 2 things. 1 potentially good, 1 potentially bad. The potentially good thing is if you're calling the subscribe in your connected callback, you actually don't need to worry about the unsubscribe because it's part of that lifecycle loop. It will automatically unsubscribe for you because it's part of that callback, which is great because if you are calling it imperatively, there might be something that means you don't want it subscribed straight away. You want it subscribed if someone clicks a certain button or something. And that means you have to then unsubscribe imperatively. And if you do that, you must make sure you unsubscribe properly as well. Otherwise, you could end up with memory leaks within the browser and the user won't be very happy. So I will show you how to unsubscribe here. But the other thing is that because we're doing it with subscribing as part of the connected callback, it means it will only actually subscribe to it once it's been loaded into the DOM, which means if you're potentially, I don't know, using consoles and you've got 2 tabs within that, if it's on the tab that's not loaded, it's not going to subscribe until you've actually opened that tab because it hasn't been loaded into the DOM yet. You can click on the tab to open the tab, have it loaded into the DOM and go back to a different tab. But you need to make sure that it's had a chance to load into the DOM, otherwise it won't receive any messages. I hope that makes sense. And then, yeah, just to show you the example, I've added the unsubscribe onto the disconnected callback.
so that if you do need to make sure you do an unsubscribe, you'll be able to see how to do it. And these are just separate methods. So let's look at those separate methods and how to do it, because they don't do it just on their own. They're not magical like that. So here's the subscribe one. So first of all, we're going to have something to store the subscription in. So first we'll check in, do we already have a subscription? Because we don't want to create a second subscription if we do. Assuming we don't have that subscription already, we're then assigning it using the subscribe method. And again, we're passing things into that method. The first thing being that message context again. The second thing being that message channel again. And the third thing we've got is if there's a message, how we want to handle that message. And here you can see I'm just calling another method called handle message, that I'm passing that message in. That handle message can then be anything that you can do in JavaScript. You can do anything. I would, however, very much say that this is all client side, and so I wouldn't then go on to do something server side on the back of one of these channels. These are designed to make the user experience better, to make it more reactive, to make them get a better experience. It's not used for saving things to databases and things like that. So you can do anything you want in that method, but just try to avoid things that affect the database. And then the last thing is we are passing through the scope, and I'll explain what that means on the next slide. Let's quickly look at the unsubscribe though. First of all, we're calling the unsubscribe method, passing it, and then we're just setting it to null. Unsubscribing is easy, but just if you are calling it imperatively, make sure you do it. You don't have to do it if you're calling it as part of the connected callback, but it's probably not a bad idea. So that's it. That's how you publish and subscribe or unsubscribe to the channels. I promised you I'd talk about application scope. So this is the diagram from the official documentations around application scope. So if you don't include application scope, by default, the components in the light blue are things that will be able to subscribe to your messages. So the console tab that you've got open, your utility bar items, I won't stand here and read them all out, you can read them. But you can see that you can't have hidden console tabs or hidden sub-tabs included if you use the default. So by including that application scope, you can then use those hidden ones. With the caveat that I mentioned earlier, it needs to have at least been loaded into the DOM. So if it's a component on the contact and you want it to be readable from something that happens on the account, then being a sub-tab of one, you need to make sure that contact page has had the chance to load into the DOM so that you can go back to the account page. Otherwise, it won't have subscribed and it won't make the difference. But at least it then does allow you to access those hidden ones by using that application scope. What have we got next? Excellent. We're on to the caveats now. So most of these are kind of probably touched upon, but just to really hammer it home, it doesn't work with browser cross-tab. This is, like I keep saying, it's client-side, it's based on the DOM. And that means if I've got the same tab open in two different windows, something that happens on the first window isn't going to affect anything on the second window through the message channel because it is within that DOM session. Similarly, if I've got a tab open and my friend's got that same tab open, a message sent on my one isn't going to reach their one because it's different DOMs. It sounds obvious, but just to make sure I hammer that home, it is all client side. However, as I put on the previous page, it does work within things like your console tabs, your Lightning tab components, things like that. Those within the app tabs it works well on, but not browser tabs. Next one, I know I said this a lot, but just if you do, just do make sure you subscribe and unsubscribe correctly to avoid things like your memory leaks and unexpected behaviors. The next one is about making sure that you don't send sensitive data through the message channels. If you're sending a whole lot of data, but you're only actually going to be displaying one bit of it to the end user, don't forget that all that data you are sending could potentially be seen in the developer console or somewhere if someone knows what they're looking for. So don't think about the data you're sending through the message channel and make sure you're only sending data that's necessary. And if there is confidential data in there that you're not then displaying back, it might not be the right way to do it. So just think about the data that you're sending through and make sure it's sensible. And the last one is one I added recently after a conversation with one of my colleagues. And that is that I'm telling you all about Lightning message channels and how it makes everything really great and modular, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be the right answer. Please, do go and have a play if you have never used them before. But there are times when actually it is worth sending the data up and down. If you've got components that are already going to be tightly coupled for other reasons anyway, why complexify it? Is that a word? Why make it more complex by adding message channels when you can just send it up for whatever? So yeah, just make sure you're using the right tool for the job. These are great, but there is still a time and place for the other method that I was moaning about earlier. I think that is all my slides done. This on the right is the link to the link tree. It's not the code for saying you attended the session. That will come up, but that's got a link tree, and there I've got a whole host of documentation. I don't think these slides have added it to it yet, but I've got slides from previous talks and I will add these slides to it. So please feel free to give that a scan so you can see all the different documentation, however your way of learning. There's documentations, videos, blogs, etc., including how to use it with Visualforce and all. And repos, there's code examples in there as well. I do have plenty of time for any questions. If anyone has got any questions, go for it. Not easy is the simple answer. Just to repeat it for the room here, you asked how easy it is to tell if there's a failure in the subscription, to see if there's a failure, and I guess restart it. Simple answer is not. Similar to some of the other questions I've been asked in the past, if something wasn't subscribed to it and you want to resend it, you kind of can't. That's one of the things with platform events, is there's like a replay event ID and things like that. There's nothing like this on this. And so kind of repeating one of the things I was saying earlier, it's designed for the user experience, and sometimes it means it might not quite work right, which is a shame, but don't rely on really important things like database updates on it, because there is those kind of risks involved in it. Anyone else got any questions?
It's more of a, what's the best way to handle a case like that? Let's assume we have 10 components and all separate for the sake of, let's say, changing layouts and all that. And we need to broadcast message to all of them, but also not all of them should react to the message. So would you rather, let's say, one broadcast channel and 10 individual kind of coupled to individual components, or let's say one channel with the source and a target defined, it doesn't matter the payload, and let's say, okay, everyone receives the channel, and that is it for me? No, it's not for me, so I'm going to ignore it, and whoever should receive it reacts to whatever is happening there.
That's a really good question. For those that didn't hear it, it's talking about whether we should just have one message channel and each component subscribes to it and then works out whether it's for them or not. My recommendation would be to create separate channels so that they're only subscribing to the things they actually need to subscribe to, rather than receiving messages they're going to do nothing with. It does mean you end up with more channels, but I think it helps along things like performance, so you're not having these components receiving these messages that are meaningless. I have done it that way you described, where it's one channel and there'd be like a type field on it, and so it'd be if type equals X, do something, otherwise ignore it. But from my experience of that, I found actually it ended up getting more complicated doing like that. Every time you had a new thing, you had to. So I think my preference has now become, make sure each channel has a single use, and that's what it's for. And if that means you end up with 10 separate channels for your 10 separate components on the page, for me, it was a lot cleaner. Yes.
All right. Would you say that having more channels or more subscribers, does it affect the UI experience?
From my experience, it hasn't affected it too much. When I first did this talk, there was someone in the room who had created this whole page of about 20 different components with about 20 different, and I spoke to them after the talk to kind of understand their use case, and they really hadn't experienced, even with that many components, any real problem with lags and things like that. So caveat,
Not that I know of. Yeah, not that I know of. Yep, okay. Sorry, I'm going to come closer so I can hear you. Sorry, I still didn't catch that last bit. So if there's parent-child communication and they're deliberately tightly coupled like that, I wouldn't suggest using that because I know I said there wasn't any performance. There is slight performance improvement in using the event to pass it up or the standard method of pass it down for a parent-child. So if it is just, you've already got it tightly coupled anyway, you are better off using either the event on the child to pass it up or passing it down through the API. Yes. Is there anyone? Go for it. Sorry? Ooh. The best use case that I used it for was when I first used it, and it was similar to the first example I gave. We previously, the company I was working for, we had a single page JavaScript built on Visualforce, and they wanted it rebuilt on Lightning Web Components. And they specifically wanted it custom built, so it had the look and feel of the company and this and that and what have you. So it was my job to basically turn this single page Visualforce with a load of JavaScript into Lightning Web Components. And I deliberately kept them as modularized components rather than one bit for a quote, one bit for the consent module, one bit for the notes section, etc. And it meant, certainly for me, because I was the only person in the Salesforce team there, it meant it so much easier for me when they told me, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that. Like in the example, I could just change things really easily without having to, I'm terrible at CSS and things like that as well. So making it easier to do it by doing it on the layouts rather than having to change my CSS was a godsend for me. So that for me was what I found one of the most useful use cases for it. Others probably have better ones. Any other questions? All really good questions. It makes me happy you listened and stuff, so thank you. If not, again, thank you to the sponsors. But the thing that you're probably all waiting for is the code where you can provide feedback and get your points. If you don't know how to do it, you have to open the app on your phone, go to the sessions that are happening now. I think it's what's buzzing or something, and then click scan QR code. You can scan your QR code. Feel free to leave your feedback or just to say that you attended. And that's it. Thank you very much. Do feel free to come and see me afterwards if you love.